Go look at the syrup bottle in your kitchen. Look at the front. There's a cabin on it, maybe a snowy forest, maybe a warm-looking woman in an apron. The word maple is probably right there in the name or the description. Now turn it around and read the ingredients and try to find maple. For several of the biggest syrup brands in America, it isn't there. Not a small amount, not a trace, zero. The first ingredient is corn syrup. The second is usually high fructose corn syrup. What follows is caramel coloring, a thickener, preservatives, and a proprietary blend of artificial and natural flavors engineered to taste like a tree it has never touched. And here's the part that makes this legal, and honestly kind of brilliant. Read that front label again, carefully. Most of those bottles never actually say maple syrup. They say syrup, or original syrup, or pancake syrup. The maple is in the picture, the color, the shape of the bottle, the name of the brand, everywhere, except the two words that would legally obligate them to put maple in it. You've been reading the wrong word this whole time. But before you throw the bottle out, I need to warn you about something, because this is where almost every video on this topic lies to you by omission. When you compare the nutrition panels side by side, real maple syrup is not the clear winner people assume. In one direct comparison, the real stuff actually had more sugar per serving than the fake stuff. That's not a typo, and we'll get to exactly what it means. By the end, I'll show you the one word on the front that tells you everything in about 2 seconds, why a syrup with 4% maple got a member of Congress involved, and the strange reason the entire maple industry compared their fight to a jar of mayonnaise. But we start with the word itself. Maple syrup is one of the most honest terms in the entire grocery store. When a product is legally sold as pure maple syrup in the United States, it has exactly one ingredient, maple syrup. That's it, sap from a maple tree, boiled down until the water is gone. That's the whole process. Producers drill a small tap into a maple tree in late winter, collect the sap, which comes out looking like slightly sweet water, and boil it for hours until it concentrates into syrup. It takes a very large volume of sap to make a small volume of syrup, which is exactly why the real thing costs what it costs. It's a seasonal, weather-dependent, labor-intensive farm product made by people standing over boiling pans in the cold. Nothing is added. Nothing needs to be. There's no thickener, because boiling makes it thick. There's no coloring because the sugar caramelizes on its own. There's no flavoring because the flavor is the point. So when you see a bottle whose ingredient list is one line long, that's not a marketing achievement. That's just what maple syrup is. Now, the other bottle. The one that costs about half as much and sits right next to it on the shelf. That product has a category name most shoppers have never noticed, table syrup. It also goes by pancake syrup, waffle syrup, or breakfast syrup. And it is a completely different class of product, designed from the ground up to look and pour like maple syrup at a fraction of the price. Its base is corn syrup, often combined with high fructose corn syrup. For several of the leading national brands, that's the first and second ingredient on the list. One brand advertises heavily that it contains no high fructose corn syrup, which is true, but the first ingredient in its original variety is still regular corn syrup with sugar right behind it. So the sweetness comes from corn. What about everything else? Everything else has to be built. Real maple syrup is thick because it was boiled for hours. Corn syrup and water are not, so table syrup needs a thickener, commonly cellulose gum or xanthan gum. Real maple syrup is amber because sugar caramelizes during boiling. Corn syrup is clear, so table syrup needs caramel coloring. Real maple syrup tastes like maple because it is maple. Corn syrup tastes like nothing in particular, so table syrup needs a formulation of artificial and natural flavors to create a proprietary maple taste. And because none of this is a fresh farm product, it needs preservatives and stabilizers, things like sodium hexametaphosphate for texture, to give it an extremely long shelf life. Count them. Real maple syrup. One ingredient, table syrup, often more than 10. Every single one of those extra ingredients exists to imitate a property that the real thing has naturally. The thickener imitates boiling. The coloring imitates caramelization. The flavoring imitates the tree. You are not buying a cheaper maple syrup. You're buying a reconstruction of one, assembled from corn. And I want to be precise here, because this is the difference between an investigation and a rant. None of that is illegal, and none of it is hidden. It's all right there on the ingredient list. The product is not pretending to be something in the fine print. It's pretending in the part nobody reads carefully, the front, which brings us to the trick. And it's a trick of grammar. Go back to the bottles, the famous ones. Look at what the front panel actually says. In many cases, the product name is simply syrup, or original syrup, or butter-rich syrup. The word maple frequently does not appear in the product name at all. That's not an accident. And it's not modesty, it's precision. Because maple syrup is a protected description. If you call it maple syrup, it has to be maple syrup. But syrup on its own promises nothing. Syrup just means a thick, sweet liquid. Corn syrup is syrup. Chocolate syrup is syrup. Cough syrup is syrup. So the marketing does all the work that the word is not allowed to do. The bottle is shaped like a farmhouse jug. The label shows a log cabin in a snowy woods. The color is maple amber. The flavor was engineered to be maple. The brand name evokes a cabin, or a farmhouse kitchen, or a grandmother. Every signal in your brain says maple. The only thing that doesn't say maple is the sentence you'd have to read to hold them to it. That's the second word. Not the brand, not the picture. The word right after it, or the absence of one. Pure maple syrup is a promise. Syrup is a category. And the space between those two things is where this entire product lives. So how much maple actually is in there? Here's where it gets specific, and where the numbers stop being abstract. For the classic table syrups, the corn syrup ones, the answer for several is 0%. No maple at all. The maple flavor is a flavoring. But there's a second tier that's more interesting and more slippery. Some brands launched premium lines with names or claims suggesting something more wholesome, packaged in jugs designed to look like traditional New England maple syrup packaging. One of those, according to reporting at the time, listed its maple content directly, 4%. 4%, meaning 96% of the bottle was other things. Brown rice syrup, sugar, water, natural flavor, a thickener, coloring, citric acid. All arguably natural, all arguably fine, but sitting in a jug that, in the words of maple producers, was virtually indistinguishable from the way real maple syrup has been packaged for generations, and placed on the shelf right next to it, at half the price. And that is when this stopped being a grocery aisle disagreement and became a political one. Maple producers in Vermont and New Hampshire petitioned the FDA to investigate whether the packaging and the all-natural claim were misleading consumers. A U.S. representative from Vermont wrote directly to the FDA commissioner, arguing that consumers outside of maple country, people who don't have a trained eye for the real thing, could be fooled by the labeling. The State Maple Producers Association filed a formal complaint with its state agriculture department, saying plainly that the packaging misled consumers into thinking they were buying real maple syrup. The company's response was, essentially, that it followed the rules. A spokeswoman stated the product complied with all FDA regulations. And here's the detail that reveals the whole system. The FDA said it does not have a definition for natural. An agency spokeswoman explained that labels must be truthful and not misleading in general, and that such claims would be reviewed case by case. There is no definition. That's the answer. The single most reassuring word in the grocery store is not defined by the agency that regulates the grocery store. The company did eventually announce it would remove the caramel coloring from that product line. A separate class action in 2018 challenged the all-natural claim on the grounds that xanthan gum, a thickener produced through an industrial fermentation and processing method, is not a natural ingredient. That was an allegation, and I'm not telling you a court found the company guilty of deceiving anyone. What I'm telling you is that the fight had to happen at all, over a bottle whose entire visual language said farm, while its contents said factory. And the maple industry, at this point, made an argument I think about a lot. In a letter to the FDA, maple trade groups argued that when consumers see the word maple on a product, they understand it to mean actual maple syrup, the same way mayo is universally understood to mean mayonnaise. They pointed directly to an FDA warning letter that had gone out to the makers of a product called Just Mayo, which contained no eggs and therefore, by federal definition, was not mayonnaise. Their point was simple and hard to argue with. If a word in a product name creates a specific expectation in a shopper's mind, the product should have to meet it. That principle got enforced for mayonnaise. It has been much softer for maple. Around the same time, a lawsuit accused a major oatmeal brand of misleading consumers with maple and brown sugar packaging that pictured a pitcher of syrup while containing no real maple. So that's the case. And if this video stopped here, you'd walk away certain that the expensive bottle is the good one and the cheap bottle is the fraud. Except that's not what the nutrition labels say. And this is the part I refuse to skip. Compare the two panels side by side and something counterintuitive shows up. Per serving, pure maple syrup can contain more sugar than table syrup. In one comparison, a quarter cup of real maple syrup came in at around 53 grams of sugar and 200 calories, which was actually higher than several of the fake syrups it was measured against. A quarter cup of the real thing exceeds the daily added sugar limit recommended by the World Health Organization for a 2,000 calorie diet. all by itself. Yes, real maple syrup contains trace minerals and antioxidants that corn syrup doesn't. That's true, and it's a genuine point in its favor. But the honest framing is the one a clinical nutrition professor gave when asked about this directly. If you're using either one sparingly on pancakes, the health difference between them is not that great. Both are concentrated sugar. One is concentrated sugar from a tree with a few minerals along for the ride. The other is concentrated sugar from corn with a support crew of additives. So if you switched to real maple syrup purely because you believed it was a health food, I'd rather you hear this from a channel that respects you than find out later. It's a better food. It is not a healthy one, which means the real story here was never nutrition. It was value and honesty, and those two things are exactly where the gap lives. Because here's what you're actually paying for when you buy the fake bottle. You're paying for corn syrup, water, and flavoring, three of the cheapest inputs in the food industry, at a price set by the reputation of a product made by farmers boiling sap in the snow. The bottle borrows the cabin, the color, the amber, the whole mythology of maple, and gives you a formulation with none of the cost of producing it. And the reason it's allowed to do that is that it never technically claimed to be maple in the first place. Now let's ground this, because this channel doesn't do panic. Table syrup is not dangerous. Corn syrup is sugar. The thickeners and preservatives in it are approved additives, and the flavoring is the same category of thing used across the food industry. If you grew up on the stuff and you love it, keep buying it. It's cheap, it lasts forever, and it does the job. Millions of people genuinely prefer the taste, and there's nothing wrong with that. The point of this video is not that you're eating something terrible. The point is that you should know which product you're holding and pay the price that product deserves. So here's the 10-second test for the breakfast aisle. First, read the product name, not the brand name, the product name. If it says pure maple syrup, you're holding maple syrup, full stop. If it says just syrup, original syrup, pancake syrup, table syrup, or breakfast syrup, you're holding a corn-based product designed to resemble maple. That single word is the fastest label check in this entire aisle. Second, count the ingredients. Real maple syrup has one. If your list runs to 5, 8, or 12, every one of those extra entries is doing a job that boiling sap does for free. Third, be careful with the word maple as an adjective. Maple flavored, maple style, or a picture of a maple leaf are decorations, not declarations. And treat all natural as meaningless here specifically, because the FDA has told us plainly that it has no definition for it. Fourth, if you want the real thing, the grade on the bottle, golden, amber, dark, very dark, is not a quality ranking. It describes when in the season the sap was collected and how strong the flavor is. Darker syrup was harvested later and tastes more intensely of maple. It's a flavor preference, not a hierarchy, and the darker grades are often cheaper for a stronger maple taste. None of this means your syrup is a scam or your brand lied to you. It means the bottle was built to make you assume something the words never actually said, and the whole system depends on you reading the picture instead of the sentence. The cabin is the pitch, the product name is the fact. So go look at the syrup in your kitchen right now and read the product name, not the brand. Does the word maple appear in it? Tell me in the comments. Type maple if it does, or syrup if that's all it says. I suspect a lot of you are about to find out that the bottle you've been calling maple syrup your whole life has never once used those words. And if reading the label better than the people who designed it is your kind of thing, subscribe to Behind the Label. The next bottle you pick up, you'll check the second word first.